And I had a wild, it was my bachelor, wild bachelor days. And what, in the words of Bush, who's saying now, you know, they're questioning him about his marijuana smoking and various other things. William Bush, he says, when I was young and irresponsible, I was young and irresponsible. And so they weren't able to get stuff they could blackmail me with. So they brought up people to silence me physically, either to kill me or to shut me up about what I was saying about Nixon's escalation. But that's a crime. Even though they didn't, they backed away because they thought they were going to be patsies for it. So they didn't in the end beat me up, but they beat some other people up on the fringes of the crowd. And that was a crime ordered by the White House. When those same people were then weeks later caught in Watergate on a different criminal operation, they now were in position to be squeezed by the prosecutors as to what else they knew. And what else they knew was crimes by the president. So the president had to shut them up by bribing them. So the president gave over $100,000 to Howard Hunt to get him to lie to the grand jury about what he had done against me. That's what he was bribed for. I'm going into my psychologist's office and the attempt to beat me up by filming on the steps of the Capitol, just weeks before he was caught. These bribes were new crimes, known to new people. And they had to be paid off, in effect. So this is what John Dean called the cancer on the presidency. More and more people have to be paid off, and each one of those is a crime, a new crime. Someday this house of cards is going to come down. And it was Dean who brought it down. So I was on trial. When it came out, then these crimes against me, my charges were dropped. First time that it ever happened in a federal court. That was before I went to the jury, for governmental misconduct. And ultimately, the president faced impeachment proceedings on this and had to resign mainly for what he had done against me. It so happens that the crimes of going into the Watergate and the dirty tricks in the campaign and the illegal campaign contributions were never traced to Nixon to this day. Probably he knew of them, almost certainly, but there's no paper trail. And the people who knew didn't talk. Mitchell would have known, Holland would have known, but they didn't talk. They kept their vow of silence. And they went to jail, actually, as did Libby, rather than talk. So we don't know. But Hunt was not prepared to go. Hunt had to be paid off, as I said. And Dean was not prepared to go to jail for the president, especially for Haldeman and Ehrlichman. He said, I'll do it for the president, but I won't go to jail to protect those guys. And so he did go. And the president then, his criminal problem was what he had done against me, not what he'd done against the Democrats in Washington. So Randy Keeler's example, or John Key's getting me in to meet these people, and then Randy Keeler's example, and going to prison, and what I had done, and the threat that posed to Nixon, that I might have documents if other people had given them to me. In fact, there was a causal chain that did lead directly to Nixon's being removed from office, and that in turn made it possible to end the war. Congress, meanwhile, cut off the money, but Nixon would almost surely have ignored that. He just would have spent it anyway, unconstitutionally, as Reagan did when Congress cut off the money for the Contras, cut it off, said it was illegal to spend money to support the Contras. Reagan spent it anyway. He got money from the Saudis, from Bahrain, from Iran. He dealt with terrorists directly, etc. People are now saying, how can you deal with Milosevic? He's a terrorist. Reagan found it possible to deal with the Iranians, whom he identified as the chief terrorist state. When a terrorist has a lot of hostages, he's got something to bargain with, and he may bargain with, and Reagan did just that. But I'm saying Nixon, like Reagan, I think would have gone ahead and spent the money and kept the war going unconstitutionally, and said, impeach me. But when they did impeach him on other crimes, he was gone, and Ford was not willing to do that. Ford was not willing to do that. So the congressional ban on the money held, and the war was ended. The war ended. If you want to know then, can one person made a difference? Yes, John Key made a difference, Randy Keeler made a difference. A lot of people made a difference. The demonstrations made a difference. Without them, the war would have gone on years longer. And you can't say no to the president without any risk. But your neighbors, your bosses, well, it's trouble, it makes trouble. The risk can be small, but it's not zero. To do that takes some courage. Courage is contagious. Every act of courage that people do by changing their own lives to take these risks emboldens other people, strengthens other people to do what they can. I know the power of that action because I felt it on my own life. It changed my life.